It's time, Cougar Nation. Cougar Tracks. The best season analysis with BYU insider Mitch Harper on KSL NewsRadio and on video every day on the YouTube page for KSL Sports.
Welcome into Cougar Tracks here on the KSL Sports YouTube and KSL News Radio. I am your BYU insider, Mitch Harper. It's Tuesday of BYU Arizona game week, and let's dive into the top story of the day here on Cougar Tracks.
The top story of the day. The biggest story in the world of BYU sports right here on Cougar Tracks.
So are they going to play or not? Jack Kelly and Isaiah Glasker. Kalani Sitake, he's not giving much insight at all into the status of his star linebackers. The head coach of the Cougars was asked during his Monday press conference on the status of those two players. And, well, initially in his opening comments, Kalani kind of hinted that he's feeling better about some of the injuries that took place in Friday's win over West Virginia.
We'll see what happens with some guys that are banged up. Hopefully can get back and ready to roll for us, but that's part of the game. You know, we have our depth there for a reason, and we spend a lot of time. As frustrating as last weekend, giving up that touchdown with some of the backup players that came in and played. Those are necessary reps to our guys to get them ready, even though we gave up a drive and gave up some big plays, and I think it was 3 catches in a row. That's good for them to learn from, and those guys are, one play away from being on the field. So we did that exact same thing last year with a bunch of our guys, and now they're on the field and they actually finished the game. A good portion of them finished the game for us last weekend. So we'll see, what team we show up with this weekend. But I'm excited that some of the guys. I mean, what we're hearing, we'll find out more as we evaluate their health today. But I feel good about where we're going as a program and where we're going to be when we show up to Tucson.
It will be interesting to see who ends up showing up and playing this week for BYU against Arizona. 6 o'clock kick on ESPN2 and KSL News Radio. Coverage will begin from Tucson at noon. Myself and Kyle Ireland will have you covered out there in Arizona. But then Kalani was also asked directly about Isaiah Glasker and if he would, quote, be full go this week in practice. And Kalani kind of scoffed at that idea, but gave an update on Glasker, I guess you could say.
I mean, he's not going to be full go. Obviously he didn't finish the game, but we'll evaluate it today. We evaluate it over the weekend. We'll see where he's at. I feel good about it. The guy's a competitor. He wanted to play even in the game, so we have to be smart with him, smart with everybody that got banged up, and we'll probably have more. That's why we do the release on Wednesday, so you guys don't have to ask me the questions today.
There we go. Countdown to Wednesday night, 8 p.m. The availability report will be released, and we'll find out more on those guys. I think ideally, if you can get Jack Kelly back for Utah, that would be great. If you can get him back for the Utah game, I think both of these guys, if you can get them back for the Utah game, I think that's got to be the target and the hope. I'm not saying you can just breeze by Arizona, because I don't believe that at all. Aaron Roderick said on Coordinator's Corner, toughest stretch of games in the history of BYU football. Oh, who's been saying that? Myself. It's the toughest stretch coming up in the history of the program. Just on Saturday night inside LES, I said that with Kyle Ireland in the post-game reaction. What's about to occur for BYU football is the toughest stretch in the history of the program, and it starts on Saturday against Arizona. Arizona is more than enough capable of taking down BYU, but you're also looking at the big picture. You can afford to lose a game in the Big 12 and still have all of your goals in front of you. I'm not saying BYU is going to lose this game this week, but Jack Kelly and Isaiah Glasker do alter the outlook of games potentially, and it's risky without them. However, I think a full week, if you did have Ace Kafusi, Micah Kafusi, Miles Hall, still have Cialia Serra, you can be okay if needed. I think Ace Kafusi is going to be big time for the Cougars, but the availability report will be very interesting to see who ends up being listed as available and who it doesn't. What was interesting on Saturday or Friday's availability report for the West Virginia game, Tommy Parasis was not on there, but he didn't play, which was something kind of interesting also on the defensive side when it comes to injuries with the Cougars. Now, BYU's getting ready to take on the Arizona Wildcats, and I'm sure it's going to be a hostile environment. In Tucson. And look, head coach Brent Brennan, he wants Arizona fans to be energized to host a nationally ranked BYU team, but also he's sending the message that you better be kind in the process. This was Brent Brennan in his weekly presser talking about his expectations for the Arizona faithful.
You know, as I look forward to this next coming week and us inviting our friends down here from BYU, a top 25 team, you know, my challenge to our fan base and to everybody that loves the University of Arizona is to show up. Let's sell out Arizona Stadium. Let's make this thing the hostile environment we know it can be, and make it really challenging for our opponents. When they get here. I think that's something I know we experience every time we go on the road. In the Big 12, we experienced it 2 weeks ago at Iowa State. Sold out, rocking, loud, hard to deal with, and I think that's something that we are absolutely capable of here. And I think, you know, and also when we do that, you know, I would also ask our fans, like, let's be respectful in this thing. I think that's one of those things that we're better than that. And let's be here and then let's see a great game. Let's cheer on the Wildcats with everything we got. Let's make it incredibly hard on BYU, but let's be respectful in the process.
Classy comments from Arizona head coach Brent Brennan, who I think is getting out in front of this. I mean, I imagine that the athletic department at Arizona is saying, please send out the messaging for respect. Even in his radio coaches show, him and the Arizona play-by-play man, we're talking about being respectful to BYU and its fans and the team, because as we all know, what happened last winter in Tucson at the McHale Center, Bleep the Mormons chant emerged from the McHale Center, and it became a big story. Tommy Lloyd addressed it the following week. It was a story that kind of dragged on, and it generated a lot of headlines. The same thing is happening at Colorado. There was a story from a student reporter out in Colorado talking about a Colorado student transferring out due to those comments. So I think it should be applauded by Brent Brennan and Arizona for just getting the message out there, because every time BYU has gone to these former Pac-12 venues, I almost get the draft ready that these sort of chants are going to happen. And more times than not, it has happened like clockwork every time. So props to Arizona. And I think that being in a conference, again, there's a little bit of a little bit of unity, a little bit of brotherhood. Like, hey, let's stop doing this to our conference peer. Yes, they have different views than us. They have a different way of living than us at our school and the way we go about things, but let's respect them. And hey, you want to get after BYU, the players, the team, I am fully on board with that, because I don't want to get to a point where there's not a heated intensity with these conference games. BYU and Arizona should be an awesome matchup that has some heat and some intensity to it. Same with BYU and Arizona State. But don't insult people and don't make people feel bad because of the way that they believe things from a religious standpoint, the who they are. Don't do that. But you want to make it about the game, football, some taunts about that? Absolutely. Make that happen. I want this to be an energized crowd, but I thought that was cool by Arizona head coach Brent Brennan. Just say, you know what? Be respectful, please. Just to send a reminder to that fan base, because what happened in the McHale Center, it was a pretty big story that emerged after what was an epic game inside Tucson, but that became the headline. And I think the same thing's going to happen in football, where it's going to be an incredible game. Don't let something extra take away from what I think is going to be a really good Big 12 football game. Let's take a break. Let's get to know the Arizona Wildcats with an insider. Justin Spears joins me next here on Cougar Tracks. It's BYU football game week once again, and it's a matchup against a program BYU is very familiar with in the Kalani Sitake era and historically, the Arizona Wildcats. And BYU's making a trip down to Tucson for the first time since 2018. And joining me now to discuss the Wildcats and get familiar with this team that is trending up 4-1 this season. Justin Spears with the Tucson Star and ESPN Tucson, host of Ali and Spears in the mornings on ESPN Tucson. Justin, happy to have you on board to break down this Wildcats team that looks to be much improved from last year.
Yeah, this is a much improved team, which is crazy to think because last year's team had a guy by the name of Tetero McMillan on its team, and they also had Jonas Savianaya and Tyler Loop and Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, even though he only played for a game. But still, it's like, this team last year had a bunch of NFL guys. This year, I think that there are some NFL, talents on this team, but, this Arizona team, once the season ended, they hit the reset button and they realized, okay, the nucleus that we want to bring back, Noah Fafita, Genesis Smith, Dalton Johnson, Traden Stukes, Trey Smith, like they had a really good core of guys and they were able to retain them and not see them go to the transfer portal or, go somewhere else. And then they built around them and they did such a great job of going into the portal and finding FCS guys, finding group of 5 players, because, let's be real here in terms of the haves and the have-nots in college football. Arizona football is kind of more towards the have-nots. So they had to get really creative in how they constructed the team and the players that they added. But this is really Brent Brennan's team. I mean, we're talking about over 60 newcomers on this roster. They made some changes at all the coordinator spots. They have all new coordinators. Offensive coordinator is now Seth Dagey, who is this up-and-coming play caller who I think has been a really good match for Noah Fafita. And then the defensive coordinator, Danny Gonzalez, I mean, this guy might be up for the Broyles Award when it's all said and done because Arizona is the only team in college football that hasn't allowed a passing touchdown this season. And it's kind of funny that the only really passing touchdown that Arizona gave up last week to Oklahoma State was a pick 6 there late in that game. But the defense has been much improved. They're a top 10 unit nationally, really good passing defense, which is, I believe, top in the Big 12 right now. One of the top rushing defenses as well. Special teams is a work in progress. They've had a handful of issues, but they hired a special teams coordinator, Craig Nivar, for the first time, or it's the first time that they've had a full-time special teams coordinator since 2020. And now it feels like all the pieces are at the right seat at the table. Getting Joe Salavea, the defensive line coach, who is an Arizona football legend and one of the most renowned defensive line coaches in all of college football. So they did a lot of work in the offseason, and now they're starting to really enjoy the fruits of their labor. But you know what? We all thought that when the schedule came out, 5 out of the first 6 games are at home. So Arizona really has an opportunity to build up a lot of wins in the first half of the schedule, which is exactly what I thought was going to happen. Now this is where, it really gets tough. Iowa State was a tough test on the road. Don't get me wrong, but you have an undefeated BYU team coming into town. And then, after that, Houston is looking like a really good team. Cincinnati is also looking like a really good team. So this second half of the schedule is going to get really interesting for Arizona, but Arizona's looking to finish strong with an impressive performance, whether they, lose closely or beat the BYU Cougars, which is one of the, few undefeated teams remaining in the Big 12. So this is a huge test coming up for Arizona. And I can make an argument that this is undoubtedly the most important home game of the Brent Brennan era.
6 p.m. kickoff, Mountain Time in Utah, 5 p.m. Mountain Standard Time in Arizona, BYU and Arizona, ESPN2 and KSL NewsRadio. You bring up the most important home game in the Brent Brennan era, potentially year 2 for Brent Brennan. Last year they go 4-8. What's been the biggest change for him? I know you asked about kind of a big picture culture question this week to Brent Brennan, but just how has that culture evolved and what's been the biggest things for Coach Brennan in year 2?
Well, he said it at Big 12 Media Day, Mitch. I don't know if you remember this, but he said, we're no longer kissing ass anymore.
That's right.
And when Brent Brennan took over the program last year, he inherited a roster that I think was, at the top was very talented with NFL talent and really good college football players, but they didn't really have the depth because the timing of the hire was just bad. They brought in Brent Brennan in January. So he had already missed the first transfer portal window. And so now he's, trying to, kind of, make the best out of the situation, because I mean, that's hard with the recruiting calendar and the way college football is set up to be hired in January and missing that first transfer portal window where a lot of programs, they build up a good chunk of their roster during that time. And in 2023, Arizona was a 10-win team, one of 4 teams in program history to win 10 games. They went to the Alamo Bowl, beat Oklahoma there. And, there was just a lot of good vibes with the Arizona football program. But then Brent Brennan had to keep the gang together. He wanted to make sure that Tetairoa McMillan and Noah Fafita, that they were the important pieces of this Arizona football team. And they were able to keep, some good players like Takario Davis and Jacob Manu and all these other guys who are no longer with the program. But it just felt like Brent Brennan was doing the most to just keep everybody together and maintain that momentum from the previous season where, hindsight, maybe it could have been better if all those guys decided to enter the transfer portal, because then you could almost justify going 4-8. So last year they had expectations, and then the injuries started to pile up, and Arizona showed that they had absolutely no depth from the roster 21 through 85. Roster 1 through 20, it was, arguably as good as it gets in the Big 12, and that's why they entered with their highest preseason ranking since 1999, and they were viewed as maybe a team that could make some noise in their first season in the Big 12. But everything that could have went wrong did go wrong for Arizona last year. And then so they hit the reset button, and now it feels like Brent Brennan is more himself. Like he's really coaching up these guys, and the culture, the feel of the program, it feels more like Brent Brennan's team rather than him just trying to, maintain that momentum that Jed Fish was able to create in 2023. He's definitely coaching with some more fire, more passion. Even just talking to him in press conferences, you could just tell that there's a different tune with Brent Brennan this season. And so, yeah, I think they learned a lot from their first year. And again, the first year was a complete disaster for this program, but they feel like now they're getting to a point where they are trending in the direction that they want this thing to go. And, Arizona, they may not be the school that pulls in the highly touted recruits year in and year out, but they definitely trust the scouting department, and they feel good about the talent that they're bringing in and the players that they have a part of this program.
And that's the Big 12 in general. I mean, this is a league that everyone feels like it gets kind of overlooked at times, but great development in this league. And Brent Brennan's definitely one of those coaches who maximize talent. And I think Noah Fafita is taking a big step forward. You're seeing it firsthand. You mentioned Seth Dagey, the offensive coordinator. What have been the biggest adjustments, maybe scheme-wise, or just the key tenets of this offense that have changed with under Dagey that's working so well for Fafita this year?
I think Noah has evolved as a runner this season, and I think that has allowed him to, get out of the pocket, make some throws on the run, which is what he's really good at. And then he's also savvy enough to tuck it and run, which we didn't really see a whole lot of last year. The only time you really saw Noah Fafita run for Arizona last year was when he was running for dear life, trying to avoid the pass rush. And, BYU, I remember that game last year in Provo where they just beat the snot out of Noah Fafita. I mean, I had never seen Noah Fafita on the ground more than that game in Provo. I mean, they just took it to Arizona's offensive line and took it to Noah Fafita. But this year with Arizona, because of, the uncertainty of the offensive line, and they've improved over the course of the season. Holding was a big issue, and, allowing the pass rush to come in, that was kind of an issue, but that is kind of cleaned up over the last couple of weeks. So Arizona has a lot of encouraging stuff up there on the offensive line, but I feel like this offense is designed to get the ball out of Noah's hands quickly. And last year there was a lot of holding onto the ball, and I think, Noah is still trying to learn how to play without Tetairoa McMillan. And Noah has taken a step in the right direction. and has looked great this year. I mean, he's fourth in the Big 12 in passing yards. He was just named Big 12 Offensive Player of the League of the week, along with Josh Hoover from TCU. So, he's a good quarterback this year, but this is also the first time that he's playing without Tetairoa McMillan since the 7th grade. Him and T-Mac were teammates in 8th grade, all throughout high school. And then, of course, those 3 years that T-Mac played at Arizona. And so for Noah, yeah, you have the spring practice reps. You have the preseason training camp reps as well. But there is nothing like the live in-game reps. And we're starting to see over time him develop the chemistry with the wide receivers. Last week against Iowa State, or 2 weeks ago, I should say, against Iowa State, there were a lot of missed throws, a lot of underthrows as well. Like Noah was, throwing the ball kind of behind wide receivers, and he also overshot some guys as well. So the timing was really an issue in that Iowa State game. And then against Oklahoma State, albeit it's the worst defense in the Big 12, so you have to take that with a grain of salt. But he was hitting the receivers in stride. He found Trey Spivey in stride a couple times for a touchdown. Javen Watley on a scramble drill. He found Luke Weissong for a 47-yard touchdown. And so I feel like the version of Noah Fifita that we're getting, it's part of his evolution as an all-around quarterback. And I really think the biggest thing that's been added to his game this year has been using his legs, getting out on the run and making those kind of throws. And also they've got some designed runs for Noah Fifita as well. But Noah is also smart enough to protect himself. He knows when to slide. And so it's been a really good pairing of Seth Doege and Noah Fifita. And the thing that makes Seth Doege such a good play caller is that, he's not stubborn. And last year, it felt like Arizona's offensive play callers with Dino Babers and Matt Atkins, it was like they were trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. And it did not work. There were no adjustments. Receivers just couldn't get open, and the offense was just broken. I mean, ever since that season opener against New Mexico a year ago, the rest of the way through, that offense was just completely broken, and that's why they were really the worst scoring offense in the Big 12. This year, it's totally different. Seth Doege recognizes the talent that he has in his room. And, you may not see that bell cow wide receiver like Tetairoa McMillan constantly making plays, but they feel really good about the depth at wide receiver. And really, a big sign of just kind of where this receiver room is at right now and, the weapons that are around Noah Fifita. Jeremiah Patterson, I'm not trying to, beat up on him too much, but, Jeremiah Patterson was like Arizona's 3rd, maybe 4th best receiver last year. And this year, I don't even think he's cracking the top 10. So that just goes to show the amount of depth that they've added in that room. And Noah Fifita's got some pretty solid weapons around him.
Talking with Justin Spears of Tucson, the Tucson Star. You can check out his bylines there and also listen to him mornings on ESPN Tucson. I'm curious, you brought up bell cow wide receiver. What about running back situation? I remember Ismail Mahdi had a breakout performance against Kansas State earlier this year. Watching that game, that was a huge win for the program. What should we make of the running back situation heading into this game against BYU?
Yeah, I would say the running back situation is still developing, but there are 3 guys they feel really good about. And those 3 guys are Ismail Mahdi, who's one of the top rushers in the Big 12, Kedrick Risano, who is coming back from injury, and he got a couple of carries last game, so maybe they continue to ramp him up in this upcoming game against BYU. And then they really like Quincy Craig, the transfer from Portland State, who was a receiver at Mater Dei High School and has a receiving background, and is really a versatile running back. But, that top guy is Ismail Mahdi for sure. And Ismail is a guy that was a all-purpose All-American a couple years ago at Texas State as a kick returner and running back. He was a very special player at Texas State. And then, comes to Arizona, has a sluggish start, doesn't have the game that we all thought he was going to have against Hawaii. But then, against Kansas State, breaks out for 189 yards. He had some really tough runs against Iowa State as well. So I think he has done a nice job of really establishing himself as that top running back. And I would like to see him get more involved in the passing game. because he's an all-purpose player, like I mentioned, and he's so versatile. But we haven't really seen too much out of him in the passing game, and I think maybe you'll see a little bit more out of that, whether it's this week or in the following weeks. But, yeah, they had 45 rushing yards against Oklahoma State last week, which ain't going to get it done against a team like BYU. You have to be able to run the football and kind of stay ahead of the sticks. But, Brent Brennan also said that Oklahoma State, they put 8 guys in the box. So they were stacking the box, and they were, pretty much daring Arizona to pass. And like any good coach does, you take what the defense gives you, and then you make those adjustments, and that's what led to Noah Fafita distributing the ball, throwing for 5 touchdowns, and throwing touchdown passes to 4 different receivers. So, yeah, the running back room, I think, is really solid. But definitely, as these guys continue to get healthier, they'll be more involved, and there's still a lot of room to grow.
I think for a lot of college football fans nationally, they think of programs out west like BYU, Arizona. They just think solely offensive football. But this matchup's got 2 good defenses. You've touched on Arizona's got a top 10 defense, BYU as well. I'm curious, though, Justin, what happened exactly in Ames? Was it something like, I know there was a nice bounce back against Oklahoma State, but was there something that you feel like could be problematic going forward for the Wildcats, or do you think that that was just kind of an outlier for this defense that's been really good outside of that one game?
Yeah, I think that was really just kind of like a one-off game, and this is a very interesting opponent because Mitch, you can answer this. As far as like tight ends go at BYU, what's like, are they heavy usage on tight ends? Like what's their tight end situation?
Yeah, I mean, it's Carson Ryan. He's the top guy by far, and he's the safety blanket for Bear Bachmeier. But then after that, it's a lot of blocking tight ends. Like Kean Needs their backup, number 45. When he's primarily in, he's just mainly an additional blocker, honestly. He's not getting targeted. But Ryan is someone they look to quite often.
Okay. So the reason why I asked that is because Iowa State, they love the tight ends. Like that is like their bread and butter, outside of course Rocco Becht being just an absolute stud and a hell of a quarterback. I love that guy. Yeah. He plays with so much moxie. One of my favorite quarterbacks in the Big 12 and also college football. But Iowa State, their tight ends, like if you look at the box score, you don't really see a lot of touchdowns coming from those guys. But they made so many key blocks in that game. And then there was also a long pass, 45 yards from, was it Benjamin Bramer to Soel or somebody, and it was a big pass that no one thought was going to happen. It was like a pitch to the tight end, and then he chucks it down the field. And so that trick play set up Iowa State for a rushing touchdown on the goal line. And that was one of the weirdest games ever because there were no passing touchdowns. Like it was all just big passing plays, get inside of the goal line, and then you punch it in with Rocco Becht or was it Carson Hansen, their running back. Like Rocco Becht had -10 rushing yards, and yet he had 3 rushing touchdowns in that game. And, a lot of those big passing plays, there were a lot of 50-50 balls where the cornerbacks and the defensive backs were in a position to make the play, but that was just Iowa State's day in making those big plays. So I think that was really just kind of more like a one-off game. And then Iowa State's offense, that kind of bully ball that they play, that it really isn't an offense that you are going to see outside of maybe a program like a BYU. So that offense was just kind of a weird matchup for Arizona. But then if you look closer, Arizona only gave up 2.4 yards per carry. That's what you want to see. Yeah. As far as stopping the run, Iowa State, they couldn't really do anything outside of, the 5 yards between the 5-yard line and the goal line. Outside of that, Arizona's defense, I thought, did a great job of stopping the run. And then Iowa State, they capitalized on so many big passing plays that Arizona was in a position to make. So, yeah, I feel like they learned a lot from this game. And, you look at it like this. They gave up 6 catches for 189 yards against Iowa State. And then against against Oklahoma State, they didn't even give up 100 passing yards. I think they had 69 passing yards the entire game. And Arizona has now held 3 opponents this season to fewer than 100 passing yards. So, BYU, they will be tested against this Arizona defense. And the thing about the U of A defense under Danny Gonzalez that is very unique is that, it's kind of like Forrest Gump, man, and the box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get, because this defense, they'll bring up linebackers. Sometimes you'll see a 4 linebacker look, a 2 linebacker look, a 3 linebacker look. They'll be up on the line of scrimmage, and then they'll drop back or they'll bring the house. They'll blitz cornerbacks like Aiden Garnes or Dalton Johnson or Traden Stukes. So there's a lot of creative blitzes with Danny Gonzalez's defense, a lot of disguised looks that may not look like the picture that you see pre-snap. So Danny Gonzalez, he's kind of like the mad scientist of Arizona's defense right now. And I think he's done a really good job this season of putting Arizona in a position to be successful on defense. And, outside of Genesis Smith, maybe Traden Stukes, who's coming off an injury, there isn't really like a guy on Arizona's defense that everyone is, paying to see. And it's just like I wouldn't say a bunch of misfits, but, maybe a bunch of guys that no one really thought of as high quality players. And we're starting to see a lot of these players on Arizona's defensive side of the ball really step up this season. And it's been a collective effort. And, they call it the no-fly zone. This is a defense that has not allowed a passing touchdown all season long. Will that change against BYU's passing attack with Bear Bachmeier? We'll find out coming up on Saturday. But, yeah, this is an Arizona defense that is very creative, a lot of blitzes, very aggressive, and it's worked out so far through the first 5 games.
Talk with Justin Spears, Tucson Star and ESPN Tucson. Last thing for you, Justin. This crowd at Arizona Stadium, what's it going to look like? Is it going to be a sellout? I know Cougar fans are going to show up to this game. What number? I don't know yet. I was kind of trying to get a better feel for what the actual turnout's going to be from Cougar fans. But what are we looking at here as far as crowd goes in Tucson? Do you think this thing gets sold out?
I think this should be a sellout, man. It's got to be a sellout. I mean, these two teams have a combined 9-1 record.
Yeah.
And there's always the excuse. And listen, I get it. I totally get it. Oh, it's too late. They're talking about a game that starts at 7:30, and you're not getting out of the stadium, very late. I get that. They move the Oklahoma State game. They have it kick off at noon. Oh, it's too hot is what I hear when, it's 89 degrees outside and the on-field temperatures are well over 100 degrees. And then, it's Saturday at noon. So, people are taking their kids to go play youth sports. There's other things happening in Tucson, Arizona on a Saturday morning / Saturday afternoon. But this week, 5 p.m. in October, you got a top 20 BYU team in town. Absolutely no excuse. You got to get out to Arizona Stadium and watch this game. Absolutely no excuse. Now, the announced attendance for the Oklahoma State game was 40,000 fans, and that is announced attendance. That means tickets sold, not butts in seats. If you look at that Oklahoma State game, there was maybe half of the announced attendance. I mean, it was a very poorly attended game. But like I said, it was noon. It was a little warm. It was the first, or it was the earliest game in October since 2016. So, and there's a reason why they don't have day games in the first half of the schedule. There's a reason why all of Arizona's day games, when they do have them, they're always in November. It's because the weather cools off by then, right? They don't want to, put out 2 teams and you have a heat warning, and it's just you're just asking for disaster. So there is a reason why Arizona doesn't usually do day games, but this game against BYU at 5 p.m. on national TV, and Arizona and BYU, like, they've got some history between these two schools. I mean, Arizona hasn't beaten BYU since that 2008 Las Vegas Bowl. And, they lost that season opener in 2016, also 2018, which was the first game of the Kevin Sumlin era. And then in 2021, they kicked off the Jet Fish era in Las Vegas, losing to BYU. And then, of course, as we all know, last year going down to Provo, the Cougars just absolutely took it to the Wildcats. And so these guys have history. I love the idea of, outside of the schools within their state, right? We all know Utah's BYU's biggest rival. ASU will always be Arizona's biggest rival. But these two teams in the proximity and also the history between these two schools, I think it's only right for these two schools to play each other on an annual basis. And then there's a very large contingent of Mormons in Arizona, especially in the East Valley area in Phoenix, like kind of like that Mesa Gilbert area as well. So BYU, they're going to bring their fans. There's going to be a lot of Cougar faithful in Tucson, Arizona for this game. And now it's up to Arizona fans. You got a 4-1 ball club. This is the best start since 2019. You got a top 20 team coming into town. I'm excited for this game. Will it be a sellout? I'm hopeful that it will be, but I will definitely say, as far as butts in seats, not announced attendance, that you'll see well over 40,000 at Arizona Stadium on Saturday.
He's Justin Spears. You can follow him on X at Justin E Sports on X. And again, check out his bylines at the Tucson Star and listen to him mornings, Spears and Ali, on ESPN Tucson this week. And to get to know the Wildcats throughout the Big 12 season, always enjoy the content and that you put out, Justin, and appreciate you having me on board on your show. And thanks for hopping on this show as well.
Love it, man. Appreciate you. See you in Tucson, Mitch.
That's Justin Spears. Appreciate him for joining me today. And that'll do it for today's edition of Cougar Tracks. Before I go, I do want to give a happy birthday message to my daughter, Ruby. She turned 9 years old today. I'm so proud of Ruby. She's at the BYU softball game tonight. She's going to be going there for the fall softball game, her and her softball team. So she's looking forward to that. But time flies, man. I remember watching the BYU Michigan State game with Ruby when she was 1 day old. It was October 8th, 2016. Watching that game on the banks of the Red Cedar, BYU and Michigan State. I remember snuggling with my 1 day old daughter, Ruby, and that was just that's a core memory that I'll never forget, watching that game and BYU winning that game. I was in, that hospital just right off of, I think it's 123rd South and Bangerter out near Harriman. But happy birthday to Ruby. Love you very much. And we'll be there at Gail Miller Field for some fall BYU softball tonight. All full disclosure, I'm not sure who they're playing. I think it's Utah Tech, Not sure. But love my daughter, Ruby. Happy birthday, Rubes, and hope it's a great day for you. I'll be back tomorrow on Wednesday with more BYU football and some BYU basketball talk here on Cougar Tracks, and it's always powered by KSLSports.com.